Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I am here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We are your morning show for any hour. We get a lot to talk about today. We're marking the first 100 days of this presidency. Plenty of news has happened in that 100 days. We'll talk about some polling from it. The White House Correspondents Dinner happened this weekend while I was out of town. Canada held an election. We'll find out what's happening in America Junior. I'm just kidding. We're not going to annex you guys. And then we got some football news because I did want to talk about Shedeur Sanders, the draft, and Saquon Barkley at the White House. So before we get to all that, how you doing, Vic?
Hello, Mary Katharine. Doing just fine. Back from my whirlwind trip. As you know, the first half of last week, I was in Hillsdale, Michigan, which was a lovely time and very much of a change of pace. At the end of the week into the weekend, I was in Chicago.
Nice.
And I haven't been there in quite some time. And I have to say, the city was looking, at least in the Loop area, just fine, and took a quick jaunt all the way up to Evanston.
Nice.
I was with my son. Okay. We were going to look at a college, and while he was there, he was also a prom date to my college friend's daughter.
Oh, how nice.
It was very sweet. And they looked great. So awesome. They had a good time. So the first thing is, it was his first time in Chicago. I took him, my son, to Deep Dish Pizza. He'd never had it before. He'd heard a lot about it. Producer Phil was recommending Pequod's. I unfortunately saw it was too far from where we are. The Pequod's location is sort of northwest outside. I mean, that's heading, I think, more towards, there's all these little neighborhoods, so it's not Skokie, but it's heading in that sort of northern direction from where we were. Within walking distance, there were two. One that was very close by is Giordano's, but former Chicago people, namely Andy Ferguson, said don't go there. Okay. And instead went to Lou Malnati's. And a lot of people like Lou Malnati's, and I spoke to some lifelong Chicagoans.
Okay.
And they were fans as well as a sort of standard type. So, right. I mean, like, they were talking about Pequod's and they were making comparisons, but they said it's within the same sort of realm of respectable deep dish pizza.
The last time I was in Chicago, I had Malnati's as well.
Yeah. It's great, but it's very sort of a straightforward. I think there's like basically 3 different kinds of pies you can get, right? The Malnati, and then there's this other one, or you get a cheese.
Okay.
The red sauce is on top, but I think the key to it all is this butter crust. So it holds it together like a pie. My son liked it. He said it was, quote, very good, and then said it was basically pizza cake. Are you a deep dish fan?
I like deep dish pizza. I'm not. It's such a different category of food that I do find the discussion about it, the constant debate, to be a little fruitless because we're never going to come up with an answer.
Right.
You can enjoy both of these kinds of pizza, but they are just very, very different. I like it. I think it's delicious. So filling that I only eat it once a year.
Okay.
If that,
yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, there's a certain type of, the Chicago folks, the Midwest folks are very friendly. But there are a lot of people who they start to resemble J.B. Pritzker all over town. You know, they're just sort of a giant, big-necked, I should not want to talk, linebacker types. And they're all over the place. God love them. The thing with the deep dish is it comes in, and they said, we'll get the one that's for like 2 people. And it looked kind of small, to be honest. And I thought, you know, maybe we should have gotten the bigger ones. I saw 2 other guys get the large.
Oh, my gosh. There's so many calories in that. Just
apparently
you're good for like 3 days.
Don't even tell me. I have the 2. My son has 2. He's like, wow, that was filling. And we had like a kind of a starter salad to begin with. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It was just enough. But I feel like had the larger one been there, I would have just kept on eating because it's just in front. That's my problem. If it's in front of me, I'm just going to keep on eating.
Yes, understood.
And my son's like, he didn't even finish, I think, a part of it. And he's like, I had them take it away as a favor to me because he knew that I would eat it.
Understood.
Good.
Understood.
So yeah, I feel like when people make the comparisons, as you know, I'm from Jersey, about pizzas, I feel like it's like the hot dog is a hot dog a sandwich controversy. I mean, it's like, is it or not? I kind of think of it as its own thing.
Yeah. Sometimes it just is, guys.
Yeah,
it just is. And we don't even really need to debate it.
No, but I'm starving right now. And if I lived there, forget about it. I would look like JB. I'd be Asian JB Pritzker. Okay. That's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is I just want to give props. We did a tour of the University of Chicago on the South Side in Hyde Park. not really the kind of school that my son wants to go to. In his words, quote, for, if you're really into studying.
Right.
Is what he said, which is a kind of way of saying it. I mean, the unofficial motto, of course, is where fun comes to die, right?
Yes, I have heard that.
So they're very mindful of this.
Okay.
And the tour guide, our tour guide, his name was Arian. He's from New Delhi, but he sounds 90% American with just a 10% Britishisms.
Okay.
And it's quite charming. He was also kind of a jock, so he's wearing normal clothes and his sneakers and jeans, talking about how he loves to play soccer. And he does all these things, and
we're listening.
A lot. The big conversation was, and I was thinking, we're going to go on this tour. Are they going to talk about anything political, ideological, anything woke? Depending on the crowd. And while we were there, we saw one tent and one big banner that said, UC hates you because they fund death. And I thought, maybe I should go there. But no. Instead,
sign me up.
Yeah. His name was Arian, and he was very mindful of instead giving us the hard sell that it's more than just studying.
Okay.
It's all sorts of sports, mostly intramurals, D2 stuff, right?
Right.
But he wants to come off as cool, and we do all these different crazy things, the scavenger hunt, etc. And then you look at the crowd who's going there. These,
are they going to play a lot of soccer?
No. Okay. These kids, I feel like there's the first time they saw the light of day. Okay, that's the first thing. God love them, because they're going to be, they will be inventing amazing things. There's no question.
They're probably a good match for the place fun goes to die.
That's, I think, right. Also, Mary Catherine, the parents.
Yeah.
Real hard chargers, asking all the questions.
Oh.
I would jokingly, at the information session, elbow my son and go, ask a question now, as a tiger dad.
He's a very well-spoken dude.
He didn't ask any questions. He got up and just laughed. But you would have all these, they're, Asian moms there taking pictures,
right.
And jostling her way to the front, and other folks. I can say this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite a scene.
Yeah.
Is all I have to say, but they did a great sell.
Good.
That's all I have.
I'm here for. University of Chicago has been very good on free speech issues.
Yeah.
So they got that going for them. They have been able to establish a line between, violently attacking Jewish students and protest.
Yeah.
So
unlike Harvard.
Nice job, guys. Yeah. So they've been pretty solid on that for a long time and
Mm-hmm.
led other universities in that way. So they got that going for them. A good reason to take a look.
Yeah.
But I would be both too cold and too bored.
Yeah, the cold is a thing. He was pretty honest about the weather.
It's pretty horrific in winter in Chicago. Oof, man.
Yeah, that would be
Hardy people.
Hardy. Mary Catherine, how are you?
Well, I was also eating my weight in food in better temperatures.
That's right.
In Charleston, South Carolina.
One of my favorite towns, cities.
So Charleston, South Carolina, I did the night before I left. As you know, I don't plan. I was like, let's just see if Husk has any availability. And sure enough, I got a 5 p.m. reservation for 1 at Husk. And I was like, it was the only thing left for the entire weekend.
Did they 5 p.m.? Okay, obviously, because that's not fashionable time amongst serious restaurant types, especially in a restaurant town like Charleston. No, that's not cool. But I would take it myself because I'm old and I like to eat early.
No, it doesn't bother me at all. And let me tell you, I had to go to a function that had a dinner after that. Okay.
But did you do this anticipating that at the other function you're probably going to eat a full dinner? Because this is Kate's problem.
Because I'm speaking at the next dinner.
Yeah,
so I don't usually eat a ton before I speak. So I thought, well, this actually works out nicely if I can work out the transportation, because I really need to get over there about 6:15, 6:30. So I look at the map, and wouldn't you know it, both Husk and the event are within walking distance of my hotel, and they're in walking distance of each other by 2 or 3 blocks. It all came together.
Let me ask you this now, and for some listeners who are familiar with Husk, there's a couple locations. There's one in Nashville. I've been there. I've been to both.
One in Savannah.
And one in Savannah. My question for you is, because they had a seat for 1 at 5 p.m., did they seat you in the little outdoor bar? Is that where you ate at the bar, or you sat indoors?
They sat me indoors in the first dining room to the right as you walk in.
Oh, yeah.
Right near the window. I was not next to the window, but I was right near the window.
They should have put you at the window so when people walk by, they'll say, oh my gosh, look who's here.
Or
This is the place.
bless that lady eating by herself. What's happening?
Why are there multiple plates?
Dining by yourself, highly recommend. It's lovely. I was working on my speech. I was reading over my
Okay.
notes. So
Yeah.
I was conscientious about, I didn't want to have just like be scrolling my phone. So I was fact checking my speech and reading over my speech and writing note cards, which I felt like was an okay activity for a decent restaurant.
Yeah, it's not like you had your laptop on the table.
Yes, that's what I was trying to avoid that look. But I, was occupying myself doing my work. Had a lovely meal.
Oh, you got to tell me what you got.
Okay, so here's the other thing. Wow, the price is so reasonable. It was like my neighborhood decent restaurant here to go to this high-end experience. So I went light.
Outside of like the Beltway in New York, you discover things are actually, even in Charleston. You went light.
Yeah, I went light because I know some might look askance at this, but I had already had a delicious lunch of Southern food. When I go to a Southern city, because I don't get a lot of Southern food here, I want to eat as much as possible within 18 hours. So I had fit in a nice hearty lunch, and then I was so hungry because I hadn't eaten in the morning in preparation for this trip that I went probably a little heavy on the lunch. Okay. And so I had to go a little lighter on the dinner. And I had a delicious salad that had like pickled tomatoes and all sorts of, I like the crunchy plus the pickled. There were like candied pecans in there.
Of course.
But do you know the signature salad at Rose's Luxury?
No, I
that
do
has
not.
lychee and all sorts of stuff in it.
Exotic.
It reminded me of that.
Okay.
So I had that for the beginning, and then I had scallops on grits with smoked buttermilk.
I was going to say grits.
Mm-hmm. It was
that sounds wonderful.
Fantastic, and they were not stingy with the scallops. There were so many.
Sometimes if you're thinking, I'm not really hungry, I'm just going to have the scallop dish, which is usually you think it's small.
Yeah.
Depending on where you go.
This one was hearty.
And and also scallops are very oddly rich and dense for something that looks so small.
So I had scallops on my grits. Delicious.
No okra.
I did not have okra. I did get cornbread, which they said their menu changes all the time. So I got the cornbread, which he said was as close as they have to a standby sort of like signature dish.
Yeah, sure.
So there was a cornbread that had like ham crumbles in it and maple, honey butter on top or whatever. And so it was all pretty fantastic. I did not have dessert because I didn't have time. So I had to run over to my, I was also very full. I went to my other dinner, attempted to eat a little bit there too, because it was another nice Charleston restaurant that had made the dinner. And by the way, before I went out for this, I worked out. And do you know why I worked out? Don't get it twisted. It's not because I have to buy my calories with physical activity. That's not how I work. No.
That's how I work.
I went and lifted weights so that my body would need more food.
Oh, yeah.
So that I could then eat more food. Like it's just a capacity issue.
You're thinking like several steps ahead.
The more you hurt your body before you go eat, the more your body is going to want to eat. And so that's how I optimize my experience.
Do you know what my concern is right now?
What's that?
Is post gout and other issues, I've been eating less, and so I've been losing weight. But the problem with that is now I don't eat as much as I want, as I normally do and like to, and now my portions are getting smaller, and I find that disturbing.
Your stomach is being untrained.
Yeah, no, I was
to work at full capacity.
The second night in Chicago, we went out with my son's prom date's parents, who again, friends. We went to college together, and they took us to RPM Steak, and I ended up not getting the massive, ginormous sort of steak, but a smaller one, and it was just right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Maybe. Is it nice?
Is he growing by not growing? Okay. I then the next morning had a brunch at Poogan's Porch.
Oh, Poogan's. Yeah, sure. I know Poogan's.
Again, only one thing available, but I was able to snag it because there's just one of me.
How was it? Because it's like not too far from.
It was fantastic, and they sat me outside, so I got to enjoy the weather and the scenery and the little clippy the little the horses coming by on the tours, and so I very much enjoyed that. Had a nice Bloody Mary, had some shrimp and grits, and then on the way out of town for the love of the game, because someone had suggested on X like a couple different restaurants.
Right.
I went by a creperie that someone suggested.
Okay.
And got a Nutella and strawberry crepe there, and it was delicious. Although I'm not a sweet tooth person, so I'm not really the person.
Same.
But I thought you got to put in the work. When you're
You-
in Charleston for 18 hours, you got to put in the work, and you got to have a crepe on the way to the airport.
Yeah, I mean, I will eat sweets just to cleanse the palate. Okay.
Just in preparation.
Yeah, just
for
in
other
preparation.
food.
Yeah. So then I'm in a good place. Next time you go, a place that I absolutely fell in love with is North Charleston per se. I think it is. It's Leon's, and it's
okay.
oysters and fried chicken. And for me, that's
Mm-hmm.
it. I've now really thought about this very carefully, like last meal.
That's where
Oysters
you're
and
going to
fried
be.
chicken.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, now we know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was fun. I came back and I'm,
Yes.
cut down on
The holy city.
yeah, cut down on that type of eating for the next couple of days. But
Same.
nonetheless, had a great time. Enjoyed all my food. All righty. Let's talk about the news. It's been 100 days of the presidency, of the
Yes.
second Trump term.
Mhm.
You were noting before we started that Chuck Todd
Yes. Former Meet the Press
said that he's been
host.
the least successful 100 days. These are the worst 100 days
Worst 100
you
days,
could possibly
yeah.
have. I have my criticisms, but I don't think that is. I don't think that's correct.
No.
It's just that he's doing things Chuck Todd doesn't like. But
Yes, and also his emphasis was it was like the least consequential because it was, and the least effective because none of it was legislative.
mhm.
It's not like he passed 100 bills through Congress, and comparing it to FDR and the New Deal and whatnot. But that is not to say, look, yes, it's executive orders; they can be reversed. But the fact is, a lot has changed in 100 days, whether you love him or hate him.
Yeah.
It's different than it was when Biden was
things
president.
have happened.
Yes.
By the way,
Good and bad.
the Atlantic, which we will talk about later, snagged an interview with President
Okay.
Trump. And one of the lines in that piece introing this long cover story for the Atlantic is, all of it was shocking, much of it without precedent. They're talking about much of the first 100 days. Legal scholars were drawing comparisons to Franklin D. Roosevelt and the early stages of the New Deal, when Congress had allowed FDR to demolish norms and greatly expand the powers of the presidency. I am enjoying this revisionist history
About
of Roosevelt, of FDR from the press. Like, as
Right.
long as it can be used to criticize Trump, suddenly Roosevelt's a problem.
Yeah, so
now I would agree
Roosevelt-
with them the
yeah.
whole time
Mhm.
that Roosevelt was a problem on a
Right.
lot of fronts, but they've never thought this before.
no, with the exception of packing the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
Roosevelt is,
He's their guy.
No, yeah, he's a sacred cow.
Detention centers and
So-
all.
So it is. Yes, that's right. So it is
Just
interesting.
one little asterisk
Just
there. Yeah.
cleaning. Yeah. So I mean, and it is interesting because in the Oval Office, his portrait is there, right,
Yes.
among other Republicans and some Democrats like Andrew Jackson. And of course, I mentioned this on the last a previous episode. I can't help but think the portrait is up there because he is thinking about terms number 3 and 4.
Oh, jeez.
Something. Just
So, look, I do think that Todd has a point about the legislative agenda. It's going to be really tricky to get anything through Congress.
Yeah.
Anything. They have the slimmest of margins in the House. They've been going back about one beautiful bill or not one beautiful bill. They've hit a hurdle that they should have. They've exceeded their expectations in the House by getting the Senate basically dictated requirements to the House in that budget resolution. That was the first step. Johnson sort of pulled a rabbit out of his hat on that front.
Yes.
I haven't been watching the negotiations super closely. My fear is that they negotiate a bunch of things and then Trump jumps in at the end and is like, no, I want these things.
Right. At the moment that we're taping this, he is still asking Congress to back his big, bold, beautiful bill.
Right. And the thing is, with the legislative agenda, even if you don't get anything else,
right,
you must get an extension of the Trump tax cuts from 2017, because even though the press succeeded in convincing people that was not a tax cut for them and was in fact only a tax cut for the rich,
right,
it was a tax cut for almost everyone, which means if you let them expire as they are supposed to, it will mean a tax hike for almost everyone.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So, there are some in the mainstream, as you note, who have conceded that looking back on the Trump tax cut really was a cut, not just for the rich, but for a lot of us. And that was like sort of grudgingly.
It always was.
But then there are still elements of the press and the left who are continuing to hammer that it never was
I was asked
until they expire, because then they'll say, "Oh,
yes,
look
of
what he
course.
just did."
No, I was asked on CNN once in the thick of the tax package negotiation and passage. They said, "Well, look at this polling where people think that it's not a tax cut for them.
Mhm.
What do you say to that?" And I said, "Well, we probably shouldn't have told them that it wasn't a tax cut for them when it is." I think that's what I would attribute that to, is that the entire media
Yeah.
told them a thing that wasn't true,
Yeah.
and then they believed that thing. Luckily, since 2017, we've gotten to the point where no one believes anything
Yeah.
from the.
Also, I'm sure that went over well when you said that.
Yeah, I don't think it was their favorite thing I've ever said on the airwaves at CNN,
Yeah.
but there were plenty to choose from of things they didn't like.
Do you,
So-
when you think about the 100 days, what stands out at you? If you want to talk about the good before we get it.
Okay, if we
And then
talk
I'll-
about the good, I
Yeah.
think the protecting women's sports.
Yeah.
I think a general vibe shift that has what I always say is that, and this is where you have to be careful, because there is an illiberal right, and there are things that
Sure.
Trump will do that are trying to dictate too much to entities that should not be dictated
Mhm.
to about their speech, about their expression. What I've always wanted is for entities to be bullied into neutrality. Like, I don't want to bully you into giving up everything you believe. I would just like to bully you into not bullying me.
Right.
That's it. And so, to a great degree, there are entire segments of the American culture
Yeah.
that seem to be like, maybe we should just chill and be
Right.
culturally neutral. And
Uh,
I think
yeah.
that's not even really something that was an executive order. That's just like everyone's seeing the lay of the land. Like, perhaps we should not just outwardly embrace the leftist possible
Right.
position and crap all over half of the country. And I think that is an achievement.
It was, and it's like a wake up call that, the idea that you have to say biological men should not be playing in women's or girls' sports.
Right.
The idea that that's controversial shows you how far to the left the
Right.
narrative had lurched.
Yes.
And like, wait a minute, this is something that was not a thing
Yeah.
until recently.
Wild.
Right.
So there are other things, like, for instance, I think I've talked about that Marty Makary and Jay Bhattacharya at top levels of public health is a rebuke to all that
definitely.
happened during COVID. Now, I think that rebuke would have been more perfect and more energetic had Ron DeSantis been the guy that ended up becoming president.
Sure.
But given that it's Trump and that he had a hand in the beginning of the COVID lockdowns and in giving too much power to Fauci, I appreciate that he, in making appointments, looked to these guys
Right.
and gives them the reins on some stuff. So those are things that feel good to me.
And the border.
Oh, I mean, this is one, by the way, you have just illustrated the problem with Trump and the border. He fixed it too fast.
Yeah. You would think this is going to be like a major announcement, like
Nope.
how you think about, there was 1 month in the Biden administration where I believe it was over 200 to 300,000 people
Yes.
had crossed over, and we're not,
Yes.
and they were coming from all over the world. We're talking about thousands from China and from like other parts of,
And they were like,
Asia
what
and
could
Africa.
What
It
could we
was-
possibly do about this? We don't-
Haitians.
we
Remember
don't
the
have a
Haitians under the
bill.
bridge? Haitians under the bridge.
We got to have a bill
Yeah.
to stop
Yeah, we can't do
10,000
anything.
people a day at Eagles Pass. Like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. It turns out you don't need a bill for that.
And it had gotten so bad that the press could not turn away anymore. That was the thing, right? There was a couple that lives on the border, like, ranchers, and they were telling Fox News that, during the worst of it with the illegal crossings, they were people coming over all over their property, and some of them with guns.
Yeah.
And
Press
gang
is like,
members.
who cares?
And again, we're talking about 11,000, convicted criminals, murderers, or whatnot, that the Biden administration, Customs and Border Patrol admitted were in this country and we don't know where they are.
Yes.
And suddenly that number from 300,000, 200,000 a month has dropped
Yeah.
to something like, I don't know, 8,000, 7,000.
The numbers are like crazy
It's
low.
crazy low.
Tom Homan said the other day, I started in Border Patrol in 84. I've seen this. I've been at this for 40 years. I've worked for 6 presidents. Joe Biden was the first president in the history of this nation who came into office and unsecured the border on purpose. And again, the fact that Trump's rhetoric, Kristi Noem's rhetoric, ends up basically solving a lot of the problem because it is a promise of enforcement.
Yeah.
It's a promise of enforcement. And so people who are thinking about coming are like, maybe
Right.
not.
It sends the message.
Maybe there are other options.
That's
for
right.
me.
Don't even think of it.
Yeah.
Come here legally. We want the immigration. We want the talent. We want the contributions from around the world.
Yeah.
But come here. There's a way to do it.
But I do think, he solved that so quickly, again, proving that Biden could have solved it, that now you get into the weeds of how you deport people, what that looks like. You have an entire left's legal apparatus happy to bog down every single one of these cases. And look, some of them deserve to be bogged down. Like there does have to be a process in some of these cases. I don't like them putting it in emergency powers and just saying like this lies with outside. This lies outside of review. It's like, no, so did COVID. No, thank you. I'm not interested in that.
Speaking of deportation, so our friends at Echelon Insights, that's Kristen Soltis Anderson and Patrick Ruffini, they had a very interesting number here, which is since Trump's inauguration, there has been, among independents, a 22 net point shift in favor of mass deportation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is, for the longest time, the media and the narrative.
You're saying Abrego Garcia didn't check those heartstrings?
No, he hasn't changed their minds. And neither has, Chris Van Hollen's, meeting with him and the other congressman who tried to rescue him from a foreign country.
Did you see the people who are accused of stealing Kristi Noem's bag? Head of the Department of Homeland Security. Talk about the wrong straw to draw. They steal this bag, and it turns out they are alleged illegal immigrants.
And so they've been apprehended.
Thank God. It's like, oh man, any other purse.
Yeah.
Any other
of all
purse.
The purses.
Of all the purses in all the world. I had to nab this one. Yeah. You know what? That is a polling bright spot for Trump, and he remains in good stead when it comes to border security specifically. But as our friend A.G. Hamilton 29 on Twitter, who I just enjoy very much, he notes earlier this week, there were 4 national polls released today. All of them show the same thing. Trump's approval is crashing, and it's directly tied to how Americans feel he is handling the economy, and particularly tariffs. The economy went from his strongest issue to his weakest issue due to tariffs. Okay. I said the other day on Twitter that this is like taking your own honeymoon and on purpose turning it into a White Lotus finale.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I'd like to happen?
Yeah, things are going so well, everything was great.
Mayhem, shootings, disaster, everyone fear for your lives. That's what the market feels. Mm-hmm. And I understand that he's ideologically dedicated to this idea. He was at an airport the other day saying, or I guess he was catching Air Force One on the tarmac saying, the tariffs could replace the income tax. That's not true. The tariffs can't replace the income tax. And even if you could make enough money with tariffs to replace the income tax, and you somehow mustered the legislative ability to suspend the income tax, you would also have to repeal the income tax amendment, because if it's just sitting there like Chekhov's tax gun, you'll end up with both tariffs and an income tax. That's obviously how that would work. So just none of that is real.
You mean you can't just press a button? No.
And I do think that I know that Trump supporters do not love this comparison, but I think it is apt that Biden's vice was government spending.
Yep.
And he could have just let the economy rev up again post-COVID.
Yeah.
And he would have been fine without indulging in his vice, which was spending. And he did the inflationary $4 trillion.
Yep.
Trump, his vice is tariffs. And if he proceeds and continues to go down this road without making a bunch of deals real quick, he will torpedo his own presidency with his vice the way that Biden did.
It's interesting.
I'd be happy to be wrong.
Defenders of the tariff discussion, shall we say, point out that, look, at the end of the day, the market is basically where it was. It hasn't been, It hasn't been too bad. And I think the reason for that is not because people have gotten used to the fact that we're going to have tariffs, but rather he keeps on teasing out that there's going to be a delay. There's a 90-day extension, that we're not really going to go to war against China, or at least Scott Bessent's saying all these sort of things.
Well, and I think Scott Bessent, my read on this is that Scott Bessent in the background is like, let's get this ball rolling. Let's make a couple deals so that everyone feels better.
Yeah.
And Trump is just standing out here like, maybe Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like they're saying that
90 deals in 90 days.
Right. That a deal might be imminent with India. Again, I would be happy to be proven wrong. If Cat Turd wants to come to me in 90 days and say, look at what happened, I'll be like, cool. I'm glad that happened.
Yeah. One down. How many more to go?
But let us be realistic about the fact that at this point, zero have been negotiated. And the president chose to put 160 plus bilateral trade deals on his own plate.
Right.
So we got to get going.
Yeah. So that's an issue. And I feel like if things go bad, electorally speaking, for the Republicans, he's going to say the tariffs weren't the problem. The tariffs are, you all did not do a good enough job to sell it for me.
I mean,
that's my sense. I mean, nothing's going to be his fault, but he does have to figure out a way to get himself out of it. Maybe just one deal. Get one deal with a country. Lesotho, maybe. I'll take that. And then he'll say, hey, you see, look at work now. Let's just dial back now.
I think the market is desperate to see that, right? The market would be like, you see one deal inked is going to be like, yes, right? Because any signal of chilling out, they're happy to run with. Shedeur, who's the one of the reporters for The Atlantic, formerly of the Washington Post, I think formerly maybe of Time before that.
Yeah, sure.
He asked Trump about whether he's going to, flinch or blink on the tariffs. He says there's talk on Wall Street of what they call a Trump put, meaning that there's a bottom to how far the market will fall because if we're headed into a recession, you'll change your tariff policy. If we're headed to de-dollarization and bond interest rates are rising, you're going to change your tariff policy to adjust for that. Is that a fair characterization that you're watching the markets and that you're going to try and protect the American economy? Trump: I don't think so. I don't see how I could possibly change because I saw what was happening. I've been saying this for 35, 40 years. I've watched this country get ripped off by other nations, and I say friend and foe. And believe me, the friends are in many cases worse than the foe. Look, we lost trillions of dollars last year on trade with this guy Biden, trillions of dollars. And every year we lose trillions. Trillions, right? Hundreds of billions. But basically trillions. We went over the ledge into the T word. And I can't imagine it's sustainable to have a country that can lose that much money for years into the future. Is that referring to the trade deficit again? The trillions of
the
trade.
T word?
When he says trillions,
yeah,
does he mean trillions we're losing in having trade deficits?
Maybe.
It's unclear to me because that would be my guess.
Okay.
At any rate, point being, he's not interested in backing off.
No. Again, he's always been, this has always been his thing about America getting ripped off, and he's going to set things right. But the question is how? And he's, coming against this, colliding with reality. And what do you see are carve-outs.
Yeah.
Right. So things like for Apple phones, exceptions in the trade war with China, the impending war that's happening here, things that we want to make sure aren't affected by it. So, I mean, it's a slippery slope. Once you start interfering in the market like this, the next thing you know, you're subsidizing, it just acts as. And then if you try to lift it, then you're going to be in trouble with people.
Well, and that's one of the things I don't like about tariffs is that, yes, of course, whoever comes to kiss the ring gets different considerations. So you end up creating this incredibly swampy discussion.
And this has happened. Carve-outs have happened before in previous administrations.
I will quote the T-shirt, I believe, that came from Scott Lincecum, who is a trade policy writer, who tariffs are his big thing. And by that, I mean, he hates them. Tariffs not only impose immense economic costs, but also fail to achieve their primary policy aims and foster political dysfunction along the way. The political dysfunction part is the part that we were talking about right now. And it's concerning.
If Americans or the world, starts to lose confidence in the dollar or investing in America, and they try to go elsewhere, not really sure where they're going to go, that is a problem. And I think that's what had him worried initially about the bond market.
Right, the yippiness.
So, yeah,
he's concerned about the yips.
The yips.
So yeah, I think there's plenty to be said for the first 100 days, and many Trump supporters will be like so happy at the first 100 days. I do think there are a lot of people who voted for Trump, assuming they get the economy of the first Trump administration.
Sure.
And if they don't get the economy
Right.
of the first Trump administration, they're going to be ticked off.
I get it, by the way, right? I see what he's saying, looking at, which is trying to save America from, getting ripped off.
From unfair trade.
Unfair.
There's
unfair.
plenty of
I
that
get
out
that.
there.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's the first thing. And so people are looking at the economy, and what they want is, how it had, been in the last time, right?
Yes, yes.
And he gets that. He also understands, and this is the whole purpose of Doge, right? Which we haven't even talked about, like where does that fit in the pro and the con?
Yeah. Another one of my
the
favorite
first 100
concepts.
days. Concepts.
Yeah.
Because this country is on the path to insolvency.
Yes.
We know that. And they're trying to find government waste and eliminate it. Who isn't for that? So, I mean, again, with the sort of the shrinking or elimination of USAID, for example, or the possible elimination of the Department of Education or all these other massive bureaucracies.
Right.
I get it. But once again, he collides with the reality, which is the only way you're actually going to get to, what is this number, 1.6 trillion?
Yeah.
Is if you go after entitlements. That would be Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and nobody is going for that.
And this is
we can say next month the United States goes bankrupt unless we do something, and you were going to still get pushback.
No, it's so funny that that lefties go after him for allegedly threatening Social Security, because that's one of the most disappointing things about Trump is that he will brook no discussion of entitlement spending. No. And look, I understand.
And it's a winning. Yeah.
I understand it because it hurts. It hurts. It's not a winning issue.
Yeah.
I get it. Even though Social Security is not going to exist for the next generation. Yeah. And if it did, it would be like, here's your $157, right? Like, it's not a good deal. It doesn't work. It is running out of money. There is no lockbox. Newsflash.
Right.
So, like, even though all that's true, it is a losing political issue to make an argument for reforming it. Had we done it in 2005, like George Bush said, we'd be in a lot better place right now.
And even just
I was for it.
Same. And Paul Ryan, for that matter. If you were able to lay out, look, what is your average life expectancy? What was the average life expectancy when Social Security was created and you collect money at 65 versus now? Obviously, now you're getting to the point, we know, there are people out there who have now been retired longer than they actually worked.
Yeah. We also have a ratio of workers to retirees problem because the baby boomer generation is larger than the generations that are trying to feed into the system. All right. I'm sure we'll get around to it.
But you know what?
In the next 100 days.
I'll give you another big plus. Had he focused on borders, which is an amazing thing, plastic straws. There you go.
Oh, you're right. I am a fan of that. Yeah, there's a lot to be said. A lot to be said. Okay. I am worried that he's going to handicap his ability to do other things.
Yeah, I was going to say if you wanted to talk about some of the downsides, but we could.
I mean, I think we covered that.
I was going to mention another one, but that.
Well, okay, you go ahead. Go ahead. Real quick.
Canada, but we can get into that later.
Oh yeah, that's third on our list. So we are going to talk about Canada.
Yeah.
But before we do that, let's talk about the White House Correspondents Dinner.
Oh boy.
And we can wrap up into that the fact that the president did this interview with The Atlantic. Now, he did this interview with The Atlantic after the Jeffrey Goldberg story about the Signal chat that Pete Hegseth was on and that these Houthi strikes were advertised in. He truthed about it, Trump did, and said, later today, I will be meeting with, of all people, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic and the person responsible for many fictional stories about me, including the made-up hoax on Suckers and Losers and Signalgate, something he was somewhat more successful with. Yeah, he's correct about that distinction. Suckers and Losers I do think was fake. Signalgate, actually real. Jeffrey is bringing with him Michael Scherer and Ashley Parker. Not exactly pro-Trump writers either, to put it mildly. The story they are writing, they have told my representatives, will be entitled, and this is where they got him, The Most Consequential President of This Century. I am doing this interview out of curiosity and as a competition with myself just to see if it's possible for The Atlantic to be truthful. Are they capable of writing a fair story on Trump? The way I look at it, what can be so bad? I won. Okay.
It's really quite remarkable in its own way.
It's incredible.
And it's not that he's it's not necessarily that he's a glutton for punishment. It's that he loves a challenge.
He does.
And he likes to challenge himself. Some of these, anybody else, Joe Biden, as we all well know, would either do the most secure, safe interview, softball question interview, or no interview at all.
It gets better, by the way.
No.
Do you know how they secured this interview? So normally you go through this long process, you pitch your story idea to the president's office, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Can we get something out of this?" And then you go through a long negotiation about like what that's going to look like,
Right,
where it's
of
going to
course.
happen, which reporters are going to do it. Trump, and I do think this is one of his strong points, is so accessible that sometimes this looks very different. And in this case, it looked normal for a while. My understanding is until the Signalgate thing happened, and until he flagged Ashley Parker, something Ashley Parker had said in the past about him, and he truthed something about how Michael Scherer and Ashley Parker are terrible and they can't write true stories, and he got mad about them. They then turned down the interview. And after they turned down the interview, the White House did, Scherer and Parker called Trump's cell phone, found him at Bedminster. He answered an unknown number to him, asked who was calling, and just did the interview.
Think about all the foreign telemarketers who Trump talks to, because it's unknown caller, and they'll just pick it up.
I think Scherer put it that they have imperfect control over Trump's personal communications devices.
No, I mean, but this is, yeah.
What's happening?
That's right. It wasn't.
Everyone in this administration has imperfect control over their personal communication devices, apparently.
Yeah. And who was it on the left? It was somebody from MSNBC who was saying that the difference is between Trump and Biden is you can just call.
Yeah, you can just call him. It was like Stephanie Rule or something.
Yeah, it was Stephanie Rule. It was exactly Stephanie Rule.
No, it's true.
And
he is very accessible. Not only that, it gets even better than that. Are you ready?
His cell phone number.
So he has a cell phone conversation with them. He does part of an interview, and then as part of that interview, he likes this conversation enough that he says, actually come by the Oval Office. So that's how they get the Oval Office with Goldberg. Again, these are three people who have been incredibly critical about him, to the point, I think, of Goldberg running with that suckers and losers thing, which is one of the most defamatory things anyone has ever written about Trump.
Yeah, because it's never been proven.
And Trump this is why Democrats should have worked with him from day one in 2017. He's just like, come on in.
He's accessible.
Come on in. Okay, it gets better. Scherer. One final thing. Scherer in the transcript says, did you mean to call me at 1:30 in the morning after the UFC fight? I got a call. Trump, after what? After the UFC fight in Miami. I got a call from your cell phone number at 1:30 a.m. Really? Oh no, sounds like another Signal thing.
So they didn't call. He just saw that the number appeared.
He butt dialed an Atlantic reporter. The president butt dialed an Atlantic reporter.
Wow. Okay.
And look, Michael Scherer probably just in bed and didn't take that call and regrets it, because I'm sure if they were on Air Force One
they chat
with his phone open and maybe he doesn't know he called, you get some great stories out of that. My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, no, this is like Nixon's late.
So,
if Nixon had like more access to like a cell phone or at the time, and getting the random call like to Leonard Garmin at 3 a.m. just to talk.
So I think, from my point of view, I think it's good that he's very accessible. I think it's worlds better, even though sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, the number of interviews he's giving is so high. I think it's much better than Biden. I think it's better for everyone that the more that's public, the better. However, if I were a big Trump booster, I would be super concerned about the wisdom of taking interviews with this kind of reporter, willy-nilly, random cell phone calls, middle of the night butt dials.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, they don't have, it's the extreme.
Caroline Leavitt's got to be like, my dude.
Right. It's the extreme opposite of the Biden problem.
Yes.
Which is the Biden problem is we have complete control of this man.
Right.
And he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And this one is we have no control and anything can happen.
I mean, it's really, maybe it's not Caroline
consultation.
Maybe it's not Caroline Leavitt. Maybe it's Susie Wiles who's really
Susie Wiles, definitely. Chief of staff.
Anyway, I have not read that entire piece yet. I'm sure there are plenty of interesting things in it.
Gems.
It's a long piece, and one of the things it does, which we'll loop into the White House Correspondents Dinner, which we're going to talk about, one of the things it does is recount like how he staged the greatest comeback. Now, if you were a right-leaning person who was observing politics sentiently during this time, you know how he staged the greatest comeback. And one of the reasons he was able to stage the greatest comeback is because the entire press corps ignored the fact that the last president was absent, senile, unable to manage himself, and likely not doing the job of the presidency for at least 3 of those 4 years.
Right.
And the press did not want to talk about that at all, which is what opened the door to the comeback. So I'm glad that The Atlantic is writing about it now, but I understood that already. So I will review the piece
and also,
at my leisure.
and also and convincing Americans that he is the more normal candidate versus Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Because, again, one of the great lines of all time, right? She's for they, them, and he's for you.
So good.
I mean,
really, truly
that was
one
it.
of the best.
And they couldn't fight back against it because they needed the they, them people.
Yeah.
That's their bread and butter. And so
okay.
They were doomed.
At this event.
Oh, the White House Correspondents Dinner, the annual self-congratulatory.
Yes, briefly, yes. It's just a series of parties and a dinner that is very self-congratulatory.
Adjectives I will not use on this family show.
And yeah. I know what that crick in your neck is from.
No.
So.
Wow, very Katharine.
I didn't say it.
Oh.
So the press corps gets together for this series of parties. Dinners, events, all the corporate sponsors are around, all the media sponsors are around. They're all having cocktail parties at various venues. It can be very fun. I have been to these events in the past.
Too, several times.
The tone of it varies wildly from like a Biden presidency, certainly an Obama presidency, to a Trump presidency. So during the Obama years, it kind of reached its cool kid zenith.
Oh, of that first year, Tom Cruise flew in.
Yeah, I mean, it was like all of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Everyone thought that Obama was like the coolest ever.
They got to see
DC
him.
suddenly became this very cool town, which it's not generally recognized as. And everybody was just having the time of their life at the White House Correspondents Dinner. The problem is it's put on by the White House Correspondents Association, press members who are supposed to be critically covering the president and his administration. So when it's all glitterati and it's all sucking up and it's all just so cozy, it does have a little bit of a gross feeling.
Sure. And props for the New York Times for, I believe they had boycotted it, right? They never attended. That was their big thing. Right.
Look at them. Okay.
Yeah.
There are some other improvements I would make as well, but good job.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have this big cozy to do and feat themselves and talk about how great journalism is. Then the tone shifts substantially when Trump comes into office the first time. Trump's like, I'm not going to go to that thing. They hate me anyway. And they're like, yeah, we hate you anyway. And so when Trump is not there, there's an ABC tweet that sort of characterizes the tone of the White House Correspondents' Dinner in those years, which is, there was no president. There was no comedian, because a comedian is usually the MC. Yeah. There was no comedian. Just brave journalists and the First Amendment. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
This, by the way, was accompanied by a thumbnail of Eugene Daniels, the current head of the White House Correspondents Association, who's about to get an MSNBC show, which I'm sure will be very nonpartisan, pictured in a white satin tux with cravat. Like, oh, the stark bravery of the First Amendment on display. Look, I don't begrudge you your finery, but like, ugh.
The paragon of impartiality from Eugene Daniels, who is like, Kamala Harris's super fan. Yeah. And what does he call himself? A walking Beyonce encyclopedia. That's okay. Sure.
We all have our gifts. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened, by the way, and this is reported by two of the ruthless guys were in the room.
Oh boy.
So Duncan and Smug went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And in the room, you didn't hear a lot about this because strangely, even with all the reporters there, they didn't report upon this. April Ryan, a longtime member of the press corps, was honored with an award. She is an African-American journalist. She's been there for a long time.
I know where this is going.
She's quite left-leaning. And so the White House Correspondents Association is giving her the Dunnigan Payne Award, which was created in 2022 to honor the first Black women to cover the White House, Alice Dunnigan and Ethel L. Payne. So Daniels is up there as the president, also an African-American man, praising April Ryan. And in the ballroom, they cut to Yamiche Alcindor.
Oh, boy.
And a picture, I believe, of Yamiche Alcindor, who is another African-American
Wait a minute.
woman.
A picture? Like a photo?
Yeah, like in the room, it's like, oh, no. And you can tell Eugene Daniels is like, it's not her. That's not her. Now, I feel terrible for whoever made this mistake. Yeah. I feel bad even for April Ryan because this is like your moment.
Yeah.
And it gets messed up like this.
That's
if this were any other organization,
oh my gosh,
the press would roast them so hard for getting two Black women mixed up at the moment of their April Ryan's like career pinnacle. This is what we're doing.
And the press covered it up, didn't they?
They haven't covered that
Yeah.
one in depth, my friends.
Yeah.
They really have not.
Well, of course, they're all parts of Correspondents Association. Can I give you 2 favorite quotes?
You said there were,
Yeah.
I found
Sorry.
a little bit of reporting on this. Hold on. There were audible gasps at the footage mixing up 2 of the media's best known and most accomplished Black women. People could be heard shouting, "That's not April."
They were actually, yeah.
You know what? Yeah, y'all messed up. Not only did you mess up, that is a racial blunder. That one's hard to run away from, but they will, because they all collude to say, we're not going to say anything about this. By the way, it was the Daily Beast that had this little tidbit.
Okay.
So at least
Somebody
one
did, right?
said something.
Yeah, outside of our circles.
You're going to get in trouble for that.
Yeah, no kidding.
That was wild. I just heard about that from those guys who were in the room, because, again, it didn't get very much coverage. The thing that did get a lot of coverage was that Alex Thompson got an award. He was the Axios reporter who, yes, somewhat earlier than the rest of the press corps, but later than the rest of us, noticed that Biden was sick.
Yeah.
That Biden wasn't holding it together. He, in early 2024, was writing about this. He was getting blowback from his colleagues.
Yeah.
He was given an award for his reporting on this subject. He's the one who co-wrote the book Original Sin with Jake Tapper. He has more credibility on this than others do. And let me I'll play for you his acceptance speech.
President Biden's decline and its cover-up by the people around him is a reminder that every White House, regardless of party, is capable of deception. But being truth tellers also means telling the truth about ourselves. We, myself included, missed a lot of this story. And some people trust us less because of it. We bear some responsibility for faith in the media being at such lows.
At this point, I would have been in the back of the room with an air horn and a t-shirt cannon, yes!
Right.
The most important point of the night! Are you all listening?
Do they want to actually applaud it, though?
No,
because it's right.
I say this because acknowledging errors builds trust, and being defensive about them further erodes it. We should have done better. I believe our mission is vital in a world where people are struggling to figure out what's true, and people with power are not telling the truth.
Okay. So this is very gentle criticism,
Yeah.
but they don't get it from their own that often.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate it for that reason. What is your take on this? A lot of people were mad at him.
Well, I was going to mention actually Chuck Todd.
Okay.
Who
By
was
the way,
having none of it.
I know.
And he wasn't there, of course, because he's no longer at Meet the Press.
I want to incentivize this good behavior.
Yes.
Right? So I don't want to crap all over this. I do think it's too little too late. But here, my bar is so low for the press that this is a slight improvement, because they didn't give an award to the organization that was best at gaslighting about Biden's condition, because that's what they would have done 2 years ago, right? You would have been
I suppose Kamala Harris won. What would this
there
dinner
would
be
be
like?
nothing about
It
this.
would be, George Clooney
Nothing
would be
about
there.
So go ahead.
I will say this about Alex Thompson. I remember reading his stuff and being like, wow, this is a guy from Axios who's being pretty tough on Joe Biden back before the election. And then if you read the comment section, and it was all about how this guy is a Trump shill. He's
you're
a
just
Trump
making
fan. He's
things
a super
up.
Trump guy. He's, this whole thing. You're making things up. And then he does this, he makes a speech at the White House Correspondents Dinner. And then you look at the comments, which is, you were the worst one of all. You covered it up. I mean, you never win in some cases.
Well, I do have a couple questions. Why not Annie Linsky and Siobhan Hughes, who were the Wall Street Journal reporters who got their asses handed to them for reporting on this? Why not the entirety of the Fox anchor lineup for noting these things? Britt Hume.
They don't count because they don't count.
Britt Hume was one of the earliest people to use the word senile.
Yeah.
He was like, there's a real problem here.
Right.
And again, no awards for his 2021 tweets on this issue. Right. I want to read a headline real quick from Oliver Darcy of CNN in June 2024, after that Linsky and Siobhan piece came out.
Yep.
The Wall Street Journal's story about Biden's mental acuity suffers from glaring problems. The cover-up was just in full swing. And for Thompson, I just want to say when people listen to this from the outside and you say people in power are not telling you the truth, you're talking about everyone in the room with you. That's who you're talking about. Those are the people.
Again, except for the pushback, and we talked about Chuck Todd.
Yes.
I don't know if you have that.
No, I do have this clip. You guys ready for this
He takes
one?
offense.
You guys ready for this?
At Alex Thompson.
The most gentle criticism possible, by the way.
Yeah, and this is on Chris Salissa's Substack.
All right, Chuck, take it away.
This is not a media failure. This is a failure of the Democratic Party. And I just sort of the virtue signaling that some people have done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story. No. David Ignatius wrote, I just refuse to accept this stupid premise because it's a manufactured right-wing premise in order to stain the media. The media's got plenty of things to attack them for, and there are MSNBC and CNN and pundits that absolutely carried water for Joe Biden, but they're not journalists. They're former strategists that carried water for Joe Biden. The journalist, David Ignatius, wrote a very high-profile column in October of 23 saying, is he really running again? This doesn't seem like a good idea. People like me were promoting Dean Phillips's campaign because he was running
Wall Street Journal did a bunch of coverage.
Sense. So it's not like this. This isn't WMDs where the White House worked with the mainstream media to manufacture a story that did not exist. That was a press failure, massive press failure. This was not that failure. This is an attempt by some to virtue signal, and it's this horrible sort of pitting different news organizations against each other, when ultimately the people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress.
I mean,
okay,
dude, take the L. Just take.
He sounds very angry. Isn't he angry?
Isn't it convenient, by the way, that the only press failure he can remember is from the Bush administration?
Yeah.
He can't think of any other ones.
No,
and
nothing happened.
Certainly isn't.
8 years of Obama, there wasn't one. The first one, you got to go all the way back to 2003. Before I forget, Mary Catherine,
Yes.
So I had two favorite quotes. Politico could not stop talking about the White House Correspondents' Dinner, like the lead up to it, and then during and after.
Yeah.
There was like 3-4 stories. It just keeps on going because it's so good. And here's the one. These are the two quotes that got me. One, which I tweeted about, and some people thought it was me saying this, which is not. Quote, and this is somebody there talking to Politico. It feels like people are looking for a reason to be together. It sounds cheesy, but folks seem to be holding on a little bit longer in hugs.
No, thank you.
Okay. And then the second one is some scenes from the revelry. MSNBC President Rebecca Cutler and network PR chief Richard Hudak holding court at Bourbon Steak at the Four Seasons Georgetown.
Oh, wow. To be there.
Okay. So, and finally, the last one is, quote, it's the Thanksgiving dinner nobody really wanted to go to, but once everyone was together, they were glad they came.
God, it's so embarrassing. They don't understand even that the tone shift in coverage of their own event tells the story.
Right.
Of the thing that Todd says doesn't exist.
Right. It's self-reinforcing here. Okay.
By the way, in Thompson's clip, you see halfway through, because I know the difference, April Ryan shaking her head, sort of rolling her eyes and sipping her drink, because again, even this slight criticism is too much. Yeah. And I would just say that much of the press corps is on the side of April Ryan in that discussion, which is frankly insane. The Chuck Todd Ryan position on this is wild. Yeah. That they didn't miss anything. No. That they weren't working with this White House to hide this. It's crazy.
As our friend Abe Greenwald, who has a great newsletter at Commentary, was saying, it's not enough to call it Trump derangement syndrome. It's like hysterical blindness. Yeah. Which can't see it.
Ooh, okay. No. Now we're missing.
We're at it.
Talk about
Canada. Do we have any time for Canada?
We do it more in depth on Thursday. We can put it on our list, but I feel like I still want to talk about Shedeur Sanders. I know. For like 3 minutes. Okay. Well, we can see Canada. Let me just say.
And I'll say we'll do it extend.
The right lost in Canada, despite having at its helm one of the most promising statesmen of the center.
And they're up by 20 points
in the world, and they were up by double digits.
Going to crush it.
And I'm just going to, you can decide correlation or causation until such time as President Trump started talking about making Canada the 51st state and punishing them with a bunch of tariffs, at which point the left surged because out of some fear that Pierre Poilievre would be too aligned with Trump. And it turns out that Canada has some Canada first feelings, just like Americans have America first feelings.
Right.
Now, this can't all be laid at Trump's feet. A lot of it can, because Pierre Poilievre has to take responsibility for his own campaign. But
he was put in a bad spot.
Does seem like a real opportunity lost.
Yeah, I think Poilievre was really put in a bad spot because it lines him, on the Trump side, and people are associating then him with making Canada the 51st state.
Yep.
And Poilievre just lost his own seat.
It's really sad.
In a rural district. There are two things about this, and then we can quickly jump to Shedeur, which is one, and then we can talk about this more in depth on Thursday. Anyway, they're still trying to figure out if the Liberals will have a majority in Parliament. It doesn't look like it right now. But the first thing is the pushback against the blame Trump is, well, Poilievre was just a bad candidate, obviously. That's why they lost. Okay?
But he was 20 points
That's
ahead.
the first thing. Well, he must have done something wrong. Also blame Canada because they just make terrible decisions. And the second take, however, Mary Katharine, is all part of the master plan. Trump did not want the Conservatives to win because then Canada would do well. If you get the Liberals in charge under Carney, then Canada will continue down its socialist path, be in a terrible shape, and then he can take it over as the 51st state.
Canada votes really liberally, as you might have noticed in this most recent election. So I don't want them as a state. I would maybe take Alberta. And the entire thing as a state. And, so Trump issued this Truth Social. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now what he says, which is, look how beautiful this landmass would be. Free access with no border, all positives with no negatives. It was meant to be. America can no longer subsidize Canada with the hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we have been spending in the past. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. That's why he said, good luck to the great people of Canada. Elect the man who has the strength and wisdom to cut your taxes in half, increase your military power for free to the highest level in the world, have your car, steel, aluminum, lumber, energy, and all other businesses quadruple in size, zero tariffs or taxes if Canada becomes the cherished 51st state. No.
He doesn't mention anybody by name.
So are we against borders now?
I don't know what's happening here.
Because I like the border.
Yeah.
I like the northern border. I'm good with it.
What's he up to? We're going to think about it. We're going to, next episode, what's the game plan?
I think we have owned the libs. The libs have been owned.
Okay.
No, real people do not like this idea.
Shedeur Sanders.
Okay, can we talk about Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah.
So this is from the NFL draft. Shedeur Sanders is Deion Sanders' kid.
Yep.
He played at quarterback at Colorado, throwing to the very talented Travis Hunter. Shedeur Sanders was considered a first-round pick.
Yep.
Perhaps a top 5 or top 10 pick. He was not picked in the first round. He was not, in fact, picked until the 5th round by the Cleveland Browns, and it became a real huge story dominating much of draft coverage that he had not been picked. This is partly because he's very famous, because Deion Sanders is very famous. Expectations were very high, and then they were obliterated, right? Yeah. So it's a real fall from grace. He also had built himself a draft room that was very elaborate. He was wearing a giant, iced out chain. There was a lot of hubris on display. He did not work out in the combine. Which, people take a pass in the combine. But he didn't work out in the combine. The story was that he had bombed a lot of his interviews, that he had been quite self-involved, and that people weren't sure how he would fit into an organization, et cetera, et cetera. Stephen A. Smith then is like, the NFL is colluding to not, this is Kaepernick-like.
Yes,
they're colluding to not hire this talented, young, confident black man.
Yeah, because they didn't take any black men in the NFL,
well, it turns
as you
out
know.
What he's saying is that it's a black quarterback's problem.
Oh.
Except, wait, hold on. Who was the first pick? Cam Ward, black quarterback. So, also, there's all this video of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders talking smack to each other that reveals what a number 1 quarterback pick looks like and what a 5th rounder looks like. Where Shedeur Sanders is doing a lot of jawing about other things, thinking about things that are not football. And Cam Ward is like, all I think about is football. This is all I'm interested in.
Right.
Let's do another drill.
Right.
Right. Like that was the difference in vibe.
There's a certain amount of humility that would be required. I think it's appreciated by teams. And if you start saying that I'm not the problem, you're the problem, it's the system that's the problem, that doesn't make the teams more inclined to want you until he got picked in which, what round?
Fifth round, I believe.
Fifth round to the Cleveland Browns.
I think I'm a Neon Dion apologist. Okay. He is a part of my childhood.
Yeah.
I think he's fun. I think he's fantastic and full of himself and ridiculous and somewhat inspiring.
Awkward. Do you remember he used to wear he had the sweat, the headband, but he would basically wear the thing around his neck.
Yeah.
He'd wear it around his neck. And I did that. I used to have an annual football game with my high school buddies, and it was full body contact, no padding, just like dangerous. And one time, and I always wear a Redskins jersey because, coming from DC. And I one time did the Deion Sanders neck thing, and it was used against me as a strangling thing. It was not a great idea. So that was...
I believe it was Benjamin Morrison picked up.
That's it. It was Benjamin Morrison.
So a lot of cool moments in the draft, but that became like this huge story. I also wanted to note another quick football story. Saquon Barkley was getting some flack from people for hanging out with Donald Trump, who he golfed with. And he went on social media to say, LOL, some people are really upset because I played golf and flew to the White House with the, all caps, president. Maybe I just respect the office. Not a hard concept to understand. Just golfed with Obama not too long ago and look forward to finishing my round with Trump. Now you get out of my mentions with all this politics and have an amazing day, laughy emoji. You could do a lot worse in life than living like Saquon Barkley, and I would suggest doing so.
I think Larry David's next column is about golfing with Hitler.
Yeah.
Just going to mention that. Okay, that wraps up.
Such a tired-ass column.
I know. There's too many things going on, Rick. There's not enough time. This is our 2-hour special here of getting hammered.
Lame. Like that comedy legend was like, I got it.
No.
I got it. Dinner with Hitler.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Worse than that also, and worse than that is the Times writer, the editors being, but you know what? Because it's more nuanced than that. He's not saying comparing to Hitler. He's just making it. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Victorino Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on X, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube and Instagram. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. I do wish the best to both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders in the future. We'll see what happens. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.